بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولا شبيه ولا مثيل له ولا ضد ولا ند ولا جسد ولا صورة ولا أعضاء له كان الله ولا مكان فهو الآن على ما عليه كان فلا تضربوا لله الأمثال ولله المثل الأعلى تنزه ربي عن الجلوس والقعود وعن الحركة والسكون وعن الاتصال والانفصال لا يحل فيه شيء ولا ينحل منه شيء ولا يحل هو فيه شيء لأنه ليس كمثله شيء مهما تصورت بذلك فالله لا يشبه ذلك ومن وصف الله بمعنى من معاني البشر فقد كفر وأشهد أن سيدنا وعظيمنا وقائدنا وقرة أعيننا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله ونبيه وصفيه وحبيبه وخليله أرسله الله هدى ورحمة للعالمين هاديا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه سراجا وهاجا وقمرا منيرا اللهم صل وسلم وأعظم وأنعم وأكرم على هذا النبي الكريم سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين كلما ذكره الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا عظيم الجاه. I praise Allah, I glorify Him and I thank Him for all the blessings that He gives without Him being obligated. And I ask Allah to raise the rank of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and to protect his Muslim nation. I testify no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, the one without a partner, the one without an equal, the one without a similar, the one who is unlike anything in the universe and nothing in the universe is like Him. He has no father, no mother, no sister, no brother, no son, and no daughter. He exists without time and place because He is the creator of time and place. He does not reside above the throne and He is not attributed with fatigue like the Jews say. Our Lord is glorified beyond any imperfection that the non-Muslims attribute to Him. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah Ta'ala does not resemble that. And whoever attributes an attribute of the creations to Allah is outside of Islam. And I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, the son of Hashim, the son of Abdul Manaf, from the tribe of Quraysh, is the best creation of Allah and His final prophet and messenger, sent to all humans and jinn, and He is truthful about everything He conveyed in the revelation. Thereafter, remind ourselves to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah in attending the session of Islamic knowledge, because the sessions of knowledge, they are greater and better than anything in this world, greater and better than anything than this world and what is in it. One lesson of Islamic knowledge is greater than this life, than this world, and what is in it. So alhamdulillah that we are guided to Islam, because Islam is the only true religion, the only correct religion, the only valid religion. And it is through Islam that the individual will make it inevitably to paradise and he will be saved from dwelling forever in hellfire. And we are grateful and thankful to Allah that we are part of the saved group, which is Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, which is the majority, the vast majority of the congregation. They are the ones who have the creed of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions. We're going to continue on with our subject matter of Matan Abi Shuja', the explanation of the Matan of Abi Shuja' in English. which is a beginner's book in the Shafi'i school of law. That this book is well renowned and known all over the world. Anyone who studies the Islamic knowledge formally, this is among the first books that they will take. So we're talking about the traveling and the conditions for bringing forward. We mentioned that if the Muslim, he fulfills certain conditions, so he's judged as a traveler, that he can, in the Shafi'i school, he can shorten and combine the Dhuhr with the Asr and the Maghrib with the Isha. So this shortening and combining is specific to the Dhuhr and the Asr and the Maghrib and the Isha. So we mentioned that the traveler can also combine between the Maghrib and the Isha, and the shortening is only for the 4 rak'ah prayer. And we're mentioning the conditions that the person can bring forward. So we mentioned the first condition, which is to remain a traveler until the start of the second prayer. And we got to the second condition starting from page 194. So we'll just read the first condition and then continue on from page 194. So there are 4 conditions, so the person can bring the Asr forward to the Dhuhr time or the Isha forward to the Maghrib time. To remain a traveler until one starts the second prayer. This means if one was praying Dhuhr at the time of Dhuhr and before finishing the Dhuhr prayer, he made the intention of bringing the Asr forward, and then he ended the prayer and said Assalamu alaikum, and then he stood up and said Allahu Akbar and started the Asr. And after he did that, he stopped being a traveler for a reason. In this case, the joining of the prayer is valid because he started the Asr prayer while he was still traveling, even though while praying the Asr prayer, he stopped traveling. So if you remember last class, we gave an example of that. We said if a person was on a boat and he was considered a traveler and he started the Dhuhr prayer, he intended to shorten, and then he finished that, and then before he said Assalamu alaikum, he intended to bring the Asr prayer forward. And so when he started the Asr prayer, he was still in the judgment of a traveler. But then as he was praying Asr, the boat, right, it docked into the port as he was praying. The boat went into the port, and so he intends to stay there, let's say, for 10 days. So because he intends to stay there for 10 days, then he is not considered a traveler. And as soon as he as soon as that boat docks into the port, he is not a traveler anymore. Why? Because he intends to stay in that city, let's say, for 10 days. And that's his intention. So even though he started the Asr prayer and he was traveling, and his bringing forward the Asr happened while he's still a traveler. But even though he ended his travel as he's praying the Asr prayer, it's still valid. Why? Because when he started the Asr prayer, he was still in the judgment of a traveler. And that's what the author means by for him to be considered a traveler at the start of the prayer and at the start of the second prayer. For him to be still in the judgment of a traveler at the start of the second prayer. So why do we mention that? Because a person might think, how could a person be a traveler when he starts the Asr prayer, but then his traveling ends while he's still praying? So that's one example. Who can think of another example in our audience? What's another example where a person starts his prayer while being a traveler, and before his prayer ends, he's not a traveler anymore? Who can give us another example? Yes, sir. Very good, sir. Alhamdulillah. Ahsanallahu ilayk. May Allah grant you the perfect ending to die as a perfect Muslim. Ameen. That's a perfect answer. What did he say? He said if you're traveling on a plane. So same concept as the boat. When the person started the second prayer, the boat, was flowing through the ocean, and then it docked into the port as the person was praying. So another example where that happens is in the plane. So let's say the person, he started praying while he's still in the air, and the plane landed when he's still in the prayer, and he had the intention of staying in that place for 10 days. So by the plane entering or coming into that town where he's going to stay 10 days, his travel is now over. So this is an example of someone who started their prayer while traveling, and while in the prayer, their travel ended. Alhamdulillah.
So that's how you determine the entering of the place of residence?
You determine the entering of the place of residence by going or by passing into the borders of the town.
Okay, so then why did you say when you docked? The boat was being docked.
Well, because now the boat has arrived to the town.
How about if it arrived like miles before that?
Same thing. But the docking is the one that they mentioned in the books. They specifically mention the boat docks.
So a person would just assume that, because for example, if you're in California, once you enter, like you're in an airplane, and once you enter, you know that you've entered like Los Angeles City, they give you an update. So you would consider that.
For the air, it's unclear about when you can consider it. I've heard teachers say that the elevation is not a factor. So even if like you're high in the sky, but you're within the borders of the town, that you're still considered to be in the town.
Yeah, so that's why I say like they give you like an update where they say 30 minutes before landing. So and you already know that you're in that area.
Do you? Like
You know your state well enough, yeah.
Okay. But I mean, if you're, let's say 30 minutes away and the plane is traveling like 500 miles per hour. So that's a long distance. That is.
But basically my question is if you did
Enter the town.
If you did the hood while you were shortly combined, and then once you enter the town
and you intend to stay there for more than 4 days.
Then you don't do asr, you just do it, you pray as is.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a good question. I think it's going to mention it. It might mention it, but the rule is for if the person is entering a town and that town is not that person's hometown, what they call hometown. And what specifically we mean by hometown is the place where that person, he always goes back to. So if let's say he traveled, even if he wasn't born there, but let's say he travels to a place for work and he works in that place for 20 years, but in those 20 years he has the intention of going to such and such a place and dying there and retiring there and being buried there. Or the person leaves for work and comes back, or the person leaves for vacation and comes back. But always he returns to that place because that's where he wants to be buried, that's where he wants to, his final resting place. That's called in Arabic, in the Islamic law, the watan. So the technical term is the watan, and it would be the person's hometown where they intend to die, or where they intend to that be their final resting place. So if the town that the person is entering for their travel, if that's not their hometown, right, then their travel ends if they intend to stay in that place for more than 4 days. If they don't have the intention to stay there for more than 4 days, then their travel does not end just by entering the town. Their travel would end after staying there for more than 4 days. That's for other than the hometown. When it comes to the hometown, just by entering it, the travel is over. So that was just a review. Continuing on, page 194, we're at number 2. These are the 4 conditions for bringing the prayer forward during travel. The author said, number 2, to intend to bring the Asr forward to Dhuhr time or the Isha forward to Maghrib time before ending the first prayer. This means that even if he makes this intention in the first prayer of the 2 to bring the second one forward while saying Assalamu alaikum, but not after ending this statement, not after pronouncing the meme of alaikum, then it is valid to pray the second prayer during the time of the first. So, like we said, if a Muslim is traveling a certain distance, which is about, we said there's different sayings. One saying is 27 American miles, another one is 81 American miles. So the Muslim is traveling with those conditions, he can shorten the 4 rak'ah prayer to 2 rak'ahs, and he can bring Asr forward to Dhuhr, or he can delay Dhuhr to Asr, and he can bring Isha forward to Maghrib, or he can delay Maghrib to Isha. So right now we're mentioning what are the 4 conditions that have to happen in order for the bringing forward to be valid. So we mentioned that the first one is that he's still in the judgment of the traveler when the second prayer starts. So if he's bringing Asr forward to Dhuhr, when he starts praying Asr after Dhuhr, he has to be still a traveler. The second one that we're going to mention is that when he's praying the first prayer, at some point in time before he finishes saying Assalamu alaikum, he has to have the intention in his heart that he's bringing forward. So while he's praying Dhuhr, he has to intend, I intend to bring Asr forward. At some point before saying Assalamu alaikum. So if, let's say, I'm taking a flight from Florida to New York, and I'm only going to stay in New York for 2 days. So that whole time, while I'm there, and while I'm traveling, while I'm on the plane, and while I'm in New York for those 2 days, I can pray Dhuhr during Dhuhr time, and while I'm praying Dhuhr, I intend that I'm going to bring Asr forward. That's just the intention. I'm going to bring forward Asr. So then after I finish Dhuhr and I say Assalamu alaikum, right immediately I can pray Asr, and then go about the rest of my day. And then the same thing with Maghrib. Once Maghrib is in, I pray Maghrib. Before I say Assalamu alaikum for Maghrib, I intend in my heart that I'm going to pray and bring Isha forward. So then after I say Assalamu alaikum, I immediately can pray Isha and go about the rest of my night. So this is something that's a facility for the Muslim traveler. Number 3 is to observe the order. So one prays Dhuhr before Asr and Maghrib before Isha. So if I'm going to bring forward, I have to pray Dhuhr first and then Asr. And if I want to bring forward, I have to pray Maghrib first and then Isha. Number 4, to pray the second prayer after the first one in a way that one prays the second one without a long separation, separating the 2 prayers. So after the person finishes, he stands up, says Iqamah if he wants, and prays the next one without a long separation between them. If the separation is considered long in the norm, then he cannot join the Asr with the Dhuhr. He needs to pray it after his time is in. The separation which does not affect the validity of joining is the time which is less than the time needed to pray 2 short rak'ahs. Once the time of separation becomes equal to the time of praying 2 short rak'ahs, he can no longer join the Asr with Dhuhr. He would need to wait and pray Asr in its time. So here they're giving that time. It says, in regards to delaying the first prayer to the time of the second one, it is an obligation to make the intention of delaying the first one to the time of the second during the time of the first. So, when we want to delay while that prayer time is in, so let's say now instead of taking a flight, let's say I'm on a road trip. Let's say I'm driving from Florida to California. So while I'm on the road, I leave early in the morning, I wake up early, I pray Subh, I pray Fajr, get some coffee, then hit the road. So I'm hitting the road at 6 a.m. I'm driving 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 1:30, 2:30. So now it's Dhuhr. Do I want to stop and pray and bring Asr forward? Or do I want to keep on going past Dhuhr until it's Asr time, and then pray Dhuhr and Asr together, like let's say 1 hour before Maghrib, right? So I can get some distance in while I'm on the road. You have the choice. So if I want to choose to delay, then what do? While Dhuhr is in, when I'm sure Dhuhr is in, I intend that I'm going to delay Dhuhr to Asr. It's just an intention. You just have to be aware that I'm not praying Dhuhr right now because I'm waiting until Asr is in, and then I'll pray Dhuhr with Asr. So that's the intention to delay. So if one does not pray Dhuhr until the Asr time is in, without having the intention in one's heart of delaying Dhuhr during Dhuhr time until Asr, and one just leaves it out intentionally, one is sinful for that. So the reason that the author is mentioning this case is because in the case of the person who is traveling, so he actually has an excuse to delay, but he, for example, fell short in that, and he didn't have the intention to delay Dhuhr to Asr, and instead he still didn't pray Dhuhr. In this case, he's sinful. Even though he's delayed, and even though he's traveling, and he didn't pray Dhuhr during Dhuhr time, but because he didn't have the intention to delay, he's sinful for not praying Dhuhr during this time, even though he is a traveler. If one, for example, needs 3 minutes to pray the first prayer, one needs to make the intention to delay the first prayer to the time of the second, at least 3 minutes before the ending of the time of the first prayer. If one's intention is to perform the prayer 4 rak'ahs, then the time needs to fit 4 rak'ahs. And if one's intention is to shorten it to 2 rak'ahs, then the time has to be enough for 2 rak'ahs. So similar to the concept that we mentioned before, when we were talking about the prayer times at the beginning of the chapter, that Dhuhr is in when the sun starts to decline westward from the beginning of the sky, and that is, and you have to pray the prayer before there's only enough time to do the minimum amount of the prayer, because there's a certain amount of time that if you wait past that time, you won't finish the prayer during his time. It'll be some of the prayer done during his time, and then some of the prayer done after his time. We said to fall short in doing the prayer up until that time is sinful. This is called waqtul hurma. And in the time which if you go beyond this time to pray, it'll be haram. So let's say that Asr comes in at 3:30, right? So you have from, let's say, 12:30 to 3:30 to pray Dhuhr. So let's say once you're sure it's in, you didn't pray right away, which is okay, you can wait like half an hour, an hour. But let's say that the person kept waiting and waiting, procrastinating to pray Dhuhr until it was 3:28. So is 2 minutes enough time for the person to pray 4 rak'ahs of Dhuhr, the minimum amount of the prayer? If the answer is no, then by them procrastinating to pray Dhuhr up until 3:28, they commit a sin. So the same thing with the travel. If the person wants to delay Dhuhr to Asr, he has to do it before that minimum amount of time is left. The author said, when one combines the prayers in the time of the second one, it is not an obligation to observe the order of the prayers. That is, it is not an obligation to pray Dhuhr first and then Asr, or first Maghrib and then Isha. Also, it is not an obligation that there is no long separation. Both matters are, however, sunnah, meaning it is sunnah to start with Dhuhr first and then Asr, and to pray Maghrib first and then Isha, without separating between them with a long separation. So in the case of delaying, it's different. It's not the same as when you bring forward. Because when you bring forward, as soon as you finish Dhuhr, then you can't let too much time pass before you start the Asr prayer. But in the case of delaying Dhuhr to Asr, since you delayed it, you can pray Dhuhr and then like wait 20 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes before the Asr is over to pray Asr. So it's not like you have to pray them immediately one after each other. Or you can, if you delay Dhuhr to Asr, you can pray Asr first and during this time, and then later after that pray Dhuhr, but it's disliked to do that. It's one should pray the prayers in order. Make sure if you can take notes because you're going to be tested, or just have the good memory. The author said, it is permissible for the resident during the time when it is raining to combine between Dhuhr and Asr and between Maghrib and Isha in the time of the first one of the two. So earlier in this chapter we mentioned that there's certain reasons for it being permissible to bring a prayer forward. And we said or to delay a prayer. And we said one of those reasons is traveling. So we talked about traveling. Now we're talking about the rain. The rain. Even nowadays, this judgment applies. Because isn't it the case that sometimes, and in order to get from, let's say, a place where you can protect yourself from the rain to the actual inside of the masjid, the person will get soaking wet. That might happen, right? So in that case, the person, he can, and in this judgment would apply. And if the conditions are fulfilled, that judgment can apply. That judgment applies, still applies. The author said, this means it is permissible to combine Dhuhr with Asr at the time of the Dhuhr, or to combine Maghrib with Isha at the time of Maghrib if it is raining. Let's look at footnote 276. Included with the judgment of rain is snow or hail. So if I ask you a question on the test, the question that pertains to the rain, but I say if it's snowing or if it's hailing, so you know the same judgment applies for snow and hail and rain. When the author said if it is raining, this does not include the case when there is strong darkness or a lot of mud or severe cold or the like. So we're not including those other circumstances. If there's a lot of mud, because even now in 2025, there are places in the world where there's no concrete roads. It's still like dirt roads, and there's no concrete sidewalk. It's still like a dirt path where the sheep and the goats and the cows, they walk through that path. And there's, obviously you know what goats and sheep and cows, they do as they walk. They drop their droppings. So it all becomes covered by that. So we're not talking about strong darkness or a lot of mud or severe cold or the like. Those are not acceptable excuses to join the prayers. The acceptable excuse other than traveling is the rain. Footnote 277. Here it also means if the rain wetted one's upper clothing or one's shoes. Here one does not shorten the prayers. One only combines without shortening the prayer. The author said, some Shafi'i scholars said that it is also permissible to join the prayers due to sickness. It means if someone is severely sick to the point that his sickness becomes strong at the time of Dhuhr, in a way he cannot feel khushu' in his heart, and it is weaker during Asr, that is, he is less sick during Asr, or vice versa. In this case, he is permitted to join the prayers in either of the two times, depending on his situation. Alhamdulillah. So it does happen that sometimes a person will be sick. Like let's say, in a practical example, you have the flu, you got the symptoms. When you first have the symptoms, you feel like you can't move, you feel this or that, right? But then what happens, you take the Dayquil, and your fever goes down, the painkiller works, so now you don't feel as achy and pain. But it takes half an hour, let's say, for the medicine to kick in. So let's say you started feeling these symptoms half an hour before Dhuhr is over. You can't move or you can't feel anything. You can't. Then it's not impossible for you to pray, but you wouldn't feel the khushu'. So some Shafi'i scholars, they said, if his sickness becomes strong at the time of Dhuhr in a way that he cannot feel khushu' in his heart, and it is weaker during Asr, he takes the medicine, and so the symptoms you won't feel as bad. In this case, he is permitted to join the prayers in either of the two times, depending on his situation. Footnote 278. For the reason of sickness, only combining the prayers is permissible and not shortening them, unless one also is a traveler. So in this case, one can wait for Asr, and he can delay the Dhuhr to the Asr, but he has to pray the Dhuhr 4 rak'ahs, and he has to pray the Asr 4 rak'ahs. As for the reason of the rain, it is not permissible to join the prayers except at the time of the first prayer of the two. So here, if you have the hard copy, page 195, the second word from the last line, it says except, A-C-C-E-P-T, but it should be E-X-C-E-P-T, except, like an exception. So for the reason of the rain, it is not permissible to join the prayers except at the time of the first prayer of the two. So for the rain, we're not delaying to the second prayer. We're joining the second prayer to the first prayer time. It is a condition that the rain would not be light rain. It is rain that wets the person's clothes. If it is a light rain, this is not an excuse to join the prayers. Also, it is a condition that the rain would be coming down at the beginning of the first prayer and the beginning of the second prayer. So that's the second condition. First is that it wets your clothes, not a light rain. So light rain doesn't count. So first condition, it's a rain that wets your clothes. Second condition is that it would be raining at the beginning of the first prayer and at the beginning of the second prayer. So if it stops raining before the second prayer and before the person is about to pray the second prayer, and immediately after, let's say he prayed the first prayer and at the end of the first prayer, it stopped raining. That happens, especially here in Florida. It'll be like a nice sunny day, the birds are chirping. 2 minutes later, it's a downpour of rain. And you can barely see in front of you, and it looks like it's close to nighttime. And then 5 minutes after that, the rain is gone and the birds are back chirping and the sun is out shining. That happens. So if the rain stops before the beginning of the second prayer, then they can't be combining. Another condition for one to be able to join the prayers due to rain is that the person praying would be praying in congregation in a mosque or the like, where the congregation is conducted like the musalla. So it can't be like in your house. You can't say, oh, it's raining really hard outside, I'm going to combine Dhuhr with Asr, and while you're at home. Also, the place of the one who is praying needs to be far enough from the masjid in a way that if he wants to go again for the second prayer, his clothes would get wet. So if his house is next to the masjid, it is not an excuse for him to join the prayer, because he can easily go back for the second prayer without him being soaked by the rain. Also, if one has something that protects him from the rain, and so he would not be wet if he wanted to go back to pray Asr at its time, then he is not excused to join the prayers, and if he had an umbrella. So, when I said earlier that even today this could happen, and even today, like let's say the person doesn't have a car, he doesn't have a ride, and it's a far enough distance from the masjid that his clothes would get wet. And that's the point, that's the condition, that for him to get inside of the masjid or the musalla, if he were to do it in that condition, in that weather, his clothes would get wet and his clothes would get soaked. or yani his clothes would get wet. So that's what it means about the place where he's praying to be far enough from the masjid in a way that if he wants to go again for the second prayer, his clothes would get wet. The author said, an example of this case is if a person is praying dhuhr in the masjid, and at the beginning of the dhuhr prayer it is raining, and it is not a light rain, so he thinks in his heart that if he comes back to pray asr later, he is going to be all wet because it is not a light rain. So in his heart he intends to bring the asr prayer forward. When he finishes praying dhuhr, the rain is still coming down, and so he and those who intended, like him, to bring asr forward, they stand and start to pray asr while it is still raining hard. If it stops raining while they are praying asr, they continue the prayer and they do not need to repeat it. If the rain stops before they begin to pray asr, then they do not combine the prayer. The same judgment holds for Maghrib and Isha. Hence, for it to be permissible for them to combine the two prayers, the rain or snow that wets the clothes has to be physically coming down at the start of the first prayer and the second one. So yani that's just a repetition of the conditions, and so we already covered all that. And we mentioned the examples, we explained all that. Now what we're going to do, we're going to a new chapter, which is the Jumu'ah prayer. Alhamdulillah, we're getting close to the end of the section of the prayer. And remember we said that after we finish purification and prayer, we're going to skip ahead to the other chapters in the book, the ones that we don't usually hear often. So we're getting close. After the Jumu'ah prayer, there's going to be some other chapters. And finally, we're going to end with the Janazah prayer. And then after that, we'll see to which chapters we skip. So alhamdulillah. Now page 197. The Friday Jumu'ah prayer. And then we might do the chapter of fasting because Ramadan is close. But we'll see inshallah. So the Friday Jumu'ah prayer, we're going to read the method first, which is the section over the line, and then we're going to read what's below the line, which is the explanation. 7 conditions make the Friday prayer obligatory: Islam, puberty, sanity, freedom, being male, health, and citizenship. And we're going to explain everything. Somebody asked a question here. It says for the raining case, he can combine only in the mosque. No, we said the mosque or the musalla, and a place where the jama'ah is done, but not like your own apartment. And the actual words of the author were that the person will be praying in congregation in a mosque or the like, where the congregation is conducted like the musalla. When we say congregation, and to fulfill the communal obligation. Because in order to fulfill the communal obligation, the prayer has to be prayed in congregation openly in a way that it's easy for whoever wants to find the prayer to pray. So not in the apartment. So I hope that answers the question. The author said, the conditions for performing it are 3. For the place of the Jumu'ah prayer to be a city or village, that the people of the Friday prayer would be 40 in number, and that the time would be sufficient. If the time went out, or if any of the conditions were missing, it is prayed as dhuhr. It has 3 obligations: 2 speeches in which he stands, and between which he sits, and for it to be prayed 2 rak'ahs in congregation. It has 4 hay'ah. We mentioned hay'ah before, when we're talking about some of the sunnah things to do in the prayer, like lifting the hands up to the ears when saying Allahu Akbar, like placing the hands above the navel, below the chest, with the right hand over the left when praying. For the man to have like his elbows not attached to his body but like out. This is called the hay'ah. So the Jumu'ah prayer also has a hay'ah. And it says it has 4 hay'ah: the ghusl, cleaning the body, wearing white clothing, clipping the nails, and wearing fragrance, yani wearing perfume. It is recommended to listen comprehensively during the time of the speech. Whoever enters while the imam is speaking prays 2 light rak'ah and then sits. And we're going to mention the explanation now. Judge Abu Shuja mentioned 7 conditions that make the Friday prayer obligatory. He said, Islam. This means the blasphemer who is accountable is ordered first to embrace Islam. He is not told to pray while he is on the state of blasphemy. The child who is not pubescent is not obligated to pray the Friday prayer, and likewise the insane, the slave, and the female. So anyone who is not pubescent, they're not obligated to come to the Jumu'ah. Anyone who is insane is not obligated to come to the Jumu'ah. And women, they're not obligated to come to the Jumu'ah. Also excused is the traveler and the one who has an Islamically acceptable excuse not to attend. And if somebody's traveling, let's say like the example we gave before, you take a flight, let's say on Thursday, you land in New York on Thursday, and you leave traveling New York on Saturday. So you're going to be there during Jumu'ah, but you don't have to go to the Jumu'ah because you're traveling. You're a traveler. And likewise, and also, the one who has an Islamically acceptable excuse not to attend the Jumu'ah. Hence, it is an obligation upon the free resident males who are pubescent, sane, and unexcused, if there are 40 accountable inhabitants, including the imam, who live in buildings, whether these buildings were made out of wood, stone, or clay. So like if somebody is living in an encampment, if he's living in a camp, it's just a bunch of tents together, they don't have to pray Jumu'ah. Because the Jumu'ah is only for the people who live in buildings. As the author said, أن تكون البلد مصرا أو قرية. So not the people who are living in tents. It is also personally obligatory upon those who live outside the settlement of the Jumu'ah prayer, even if they lived in the tent, provided that they can hear the call to prayer adhan of a loud voiced person standing at the closest edge of the settlement to them, not in the middle of the town in which Jumu'ah is performed. This is with the estimation that the call to prayer was recited on a windless day from a leveled and even surface, and the caller having a loud voice. The one who can hear that and recognizes that it is the adhan of Jumu'ah is required to attend, even if he could not make out the words, provided he has normal hearing. So what is this case? Let's say the person is living in an encampment, a place of tents, and he's outside of the town, but he's close enough to the town that if hypothetically someone with a loud voice stood at the edge of the town and called the adhan, and on a windless day, there's no wind, and it's an even flat surface, that person who is in the encampment, if he can recognize that that's the adhan, then he's obligated to go. And he's obligated to go into that town and pray Jumu'ah there. But if the encampment is at a distance away, where if someone with a loud voice stood at the edge and called the adhan, he would not hear the words, and he would not be able to know that that's the adhan. In that case, the people that are living in that encampment that this applies to, they're not obligated to go to that town and pray the Jumu'ah. The Friday prayer is performed within the Dhuhr prayer time, so the one who misses it would pray the Dhuhr prayer. Footnote 280. They have to know without any doubt that there is enough time remaining to pray the Friday prayer. So if they have doubt about whether there is enough time to perform what is required of the 2 speeches and the 2 rak'ah, including the closing salam, before the Dhuhr time ends, and their doubt was before they began with their opening statement, Allahu Akbar, in this case, they pray it as Dhuhr prayer. So yani it means that it has to happen, that the Jumu'ah prayer has to be done during that time. It goes to the iPad too. So the author is saying the Friday prayer, it goes to, the Friday prayer has to be performed within the Dhuhr time. And so the one who misses it would pray the Dhuhr prayer. And if the time runs out, if Dhuhr time runs out, then you can't pray Jumu'ah anymore. And you have to pray regular Dhuhr. Also, the 40 inhabitants have to hear the integrals of the two speeches during the prescribed time of Dhuhr and before praying the Jumu'ah prayer. These two speeches, which the Imam gives prior to praying the Friday prayer, he gives them while standing up when able to, and he sits between them for at least the duration of al-Tuma'nina. Then the 2 rak'ah prayer is performed in congregation by the aforementioned 40 inhabitants. When we say inhabitants, it means that these 40 free men, they have the intention that this is the place where they're going to be buried. So let's say I was born in Pakistan, and I get my education in Pakistan. I go to high school, I go to college, I graduate college, and then at 20 years old, I travel from Pakistan to America. Because the situation in Pakistan is difficult and everybody's poor and there's pollution and there's dirt roads and I want luxury and I want the dollar signs. All I see is dollar signs, and I want what they call the American dream. So I want the dunya, and I want to have a Mercedes, and I want to have a big house, and I don't want to live in a third world country. So I get a visa and I travel to America. And then I work day and night and I grind my bones and someone might say, lose part of my soul so I can get that Mercedes and get that mansion. And then, I save like thousands of dollars. And then when I'm 50, I intend to go back to Pakistan, use that money that I saved, buy land, buy a house, buy this, buy that. So when I'm 60 and 70 and 80, I just can chill living in Pakistan, retire, right? And then that's where I die, and that's where I'm going to be buried, next to my grandparents in the cemetery in the village in Pakistan, right? Let's say that's the case. That person, for those 20, 30, 40 years that he spent in America, supposedly chasing the American dream, he is not intending to die in Wisconsin. He went from Pakistan to Wisconsin so he can chase the American dream. So he's not intending that he's gonna die there. He didn't come from Indonesia to Kansas so he can live and die there. No, he's just gonna work day and night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at the gas station or the convenience store, whatever, make that money, and then 20 years later, 30 years later, he's gonna go back to Indonesia. He doesn't plan to be buried in Kansas. So that whole time he's in Kansas, he is not considered, according to the Islamic law, mustawtin. He is not considered an inhabitant. So in order for the Jumu'ah to be valid, you have to have 40 of those inhabitants. You have to have 40 people who their intention is to die there, not to go back to Pakistan or to go back to Indonesia 30 years later. So does that happen? If that's the case, then there is a valid Jumu'ah. If that's not the case, there is no valid Jumu'ah, according to a Shafi'i. Yes, sir.
What if they don't know where they want to die?
They don't know? Then for sure that place, if they don't intend to... I never heard that. But usually the person knows, yeah. Because, and he'll understand when you get older. But the person, he makes plans, he, he has like his finances and things like that tied up for a certain amount of years, or he has like a plan or an intention. Some people they buy a grave before they die, so that when they do die, the process is easy for their family. So that is like an intention. But yeah, I never heard the answer to that question. The person doesn't know. Does he want to stay in Kansas? Or does he want to go back to Pakistan? That I don't know. That's a good question, I'll ask.
What if he like suddenly passed?
If he what?
Suddenly passed.
Yes, his intention. It's about the intention. So in those 20, 30 years that he came from Pakistan to Kansas, and he's working and stuff like that, his intention is to go back to Pakistan. And after he makes a certain amount of money. So that's his intention. But if before he goes back, he dies, he's still not considered a mustawtin, an inhabitant of Kansas. So he wouldn't be counted as one of the 40 people for the Jumu'ah to be valid. So let's say here, for example, here when we pray Jumu'ah, who are the people that are coming here? Are all those people that are coming here to pray the Jumu'ah, are they intending to die here and to be buried here in, let's say, this town in South Florida? Or do they have the intention of just living here, making money, working, and then eventually going back to where they came from, right? If the answer is we have 40 of those people that intend to die here, then that's the minimum that you need for the Jumu'ah to be valid, according to a Shafi'i. And according to this saying that they're teaching in this book. There's other sayings in the Shafi'i school. The least that I know is 15. But if that number is not met for inhabitants, the Jumu'ah won't be valid, according to a Shafi'i. According to other Imams, it might be valid with a lesser number. I don't know their details about inhabitant or not inhabitant. Now, that's not to be confused with the resident. The resident is the one who is not traveling. So like that person that came from Pakistan, he's living in Kansas. This is where he lives, this is where he goes to work, this is where his kids go to school. But he doesn't intend to die there, but he's not traveling right now. And he's not in the middle of travel. He is a resident of Kansas. If there are 40 inhabitants and there is a valid Jumu'ah in his town, since he is a resident, he's obligated to go. But if the minimum number of inhabitants is not met, there is no valid Jumu'ah, so then he wouldn't have to go because there's no valid Jumu'ah anyways to begin with. So those are important details. Then the author said, among the recommended matters, hay'ah, to do when attending the Friday prayer, is to perform the ghusl for the Jumu'ah, to clean one's body, to wear white clothes, to clip one's nails, and to wear fragrance. So yeah, these are very recommended sunnah things to do, rewardable things to do when attending the Friday prayer. So the time for the ghusl for Jumu'ah, it starts from the Fajr of Jumu'ah. And it ends when there's not enough time for the person to make the ghusl and make it to the prayer on time. So if, let's say, the person, let's say he has to be at work at 8:30 a.m. So, and then he is not able to leave work before the Jumu'ah, and with enough time to, let's say, go home and take a bath and then come to Jumu'ah and then make it back to work. So if he were to go home, he would, to take the shower, he would miss the Jumu'ah. So in this case, and his time ends for him to be able to take the shower. So he would take the shower for Jumu'ah, let's say, before he leaves the house to go to work. This is sunnah. To clean one's body, if the person has dirt on their body, to wash themselves, to clean the dirt residue. To wear white clothes, so whatever white the person has, to wear it. To clip one's nails, the fingernails, and to wear perfume. And so the person puts on atar, some kind of perfume. Now specifically not saying cologne, because most cologne, it uses the type of alcohol that is considered to be najis by the majority of scholars. And so, I don't recommend that anyone uses that because number one, it's filthy. Number two, and in the Shafi'i school, the prayer wouldn't be valid if you're wearing it, if you have it on you. Not just on your skin, but even like if you're carrying it. So say like you have a little napkin, and there was some cologne with alcohol on the napkin, and you had the napkin in your pocket, then it wouldn't be valid. Your prayer won't be valid. But there is a kind of alcohol that is synthetic. It's a chemical alcohol. It's called isopropyl alcohol. That isn't filthy. So if there was a cologne made of isopropyl alcohol, then it wouldn't be filthy. You could wear it and your prayer would be valid. But so when we say perfume or fragrance, you're referring to the oil-based perfumes. The author said, when one enters the masjid while the imam is giving the Friday speech, one prays 2 rak'ah of tahiyyatul masjid. If one did not pray the sunnah prayer at home, one can intend to combine both the sunnah prayer and tahiyyatul masjid as one when performing the 2 rak'ahs. One does not pray more than the 2 rak'ahs. What is meant with praying 2 light rak'ah is to keep it short by performing the obligatory parts of the prayer. And it will only doing the minimum amount. And when we say tahiyyatul masjid, we're referring to a place that is actually judged as a masjid Islamically. Not a place like this, not like a musalla. So this is my advice to anyone who comes to a musalla, not a masjid, to pray the Jumu'ah. If you come in when the prayer time, when the speaker, he's already on the minbar, already sitting on the minbar, even if the speech hasn't started, do not pray any qada prayers. Do not pray what is called tahiyyatul masjid. Do not do it. And if you are in masjid, then you're allowed to do what is called tahiyyatul masjid, which is 2 rak'ahs, but the person is obligated to do the minimum amount of the prayer. So he doesn't recite a surah after al-Fatiha. He says Allahu Akbar, starts with the Fatiha. He doesn't do Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, the ruku'. He just does the integrals only for Tahiyyatul Masjid. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. The next chapter, inshallah, we'll cover next week, inshallah, is the Eid prayer, which is a short chapter, yani. And then the eclipse prayer, then the prayer asking for the rain, then the prayer of fear. And then, the funeral prayer is not the last one. Oh yeah, it is. Then the funeral, and then either we go to the chapter of fasting, or we'll skip to a different chapter, like the religious punishments, or certain things that are forbidden, what is mentioned that is forbidden, and the other chapters that we don't usually hear. So today we covered from page 194 to page 200, alhamdulillah, and that includes shorting and combining and the Friday prayer. Are there any questions before we conclude? No.
For the Sunnah Ghusl and the Nafil, you can start on Friday night?
Not for the Sunnah Ghusl, no, it has to be from Fajr. For the clipping of the nails, I'm not sure. Oh, I need to review that one.
The Friday prayer.
Yes, sir.
If you work, say you're a mechanic, and you come during your shift of work, and you have a little bit grind, are you allowed to put, I'm not sure what you call it, over your uniform? Is that considered?
Absolutely. Yeah, so when we mention these things about cleaning the body, those are sunnah recommendations. They're like the image of the Jumu'ah. When they say hay'ah, like the form that you should take for the Jumu'ah. It doesn't mean that you are obligated to, or that you get a sin for that. So especially if you're in the case where it's not by falling short. Like if you could, you would take the time to do it, but because of time constraints and the nature of your occupation, it's you're not able to. So it wouldn't be on you. So even in that case, it wouldn't be like you get dispraised for it. No. Any others? Any? طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات وبارك الله فيكم السلام عليكم